In the 1970s, American society's fear of hitchhiking reached its peak. A 1970s Reader's Digest article said that the odds of a woman hitchhiking being sexually assaulted were the same as the odds of not losing at Russian roulette. During this time, loads of infamous serial killers targeted hitchhikers. One of the most terrifying ones was Edmund Kemper. In 1972 and 1973, he killed and cut off 6 women's heads who were hitchhiking in the Santa Cruz area. But at the same time, a bunch of murders happened in Santa Rosa, which is only 110 miles from Santa Cruz. At least 7 female hitchhikers have gone missing after hitchhiking, and their remains were found along the roadsides of Sonoma County, naked, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. The Kemper case was solved pretty quickly, but the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders haven't been solved in 53 years. Over the years, hundreds of suspects have been investigated one by one, including several serial killers like the Zodiac killer, Ted Bundy, and the Hillside Stranglers. But the identity of the murderer has never been figured out. 12-year-old Maureen and 13-year-old Weber, both Herbert Slater Middle School students. On the evening of February 4th, 1972, they went to the Redwood Empire Ice Arena, which is one of the most beautiful ice skating rinks in the world, to attend a friend's birthday party. Around 9 p.m., after the party ended, both girls left the ice arena. Since neither of their parents had arrived in time to pick them up, although hitchhiking was a high-risk behavior in that era, Maureen and Weber had no choice but to rely on hitchhiking to get home. Then, after that, they were reported missing. It was not until December 28th that 2 hikers found their skeletal remains, devoid of any clothing, near Franz Valley Road. Wendy was a 19-year-old art student at Santa Rosa Junior College. Her friends described her as pure, innocent, and childlike. On the morning of March 4th, 1972, after buying a wooden soy sauce barrel in San Francisco's Chinatown, she stood by the on-ramp of Highway 101, ready to hitchhike back to Santa Rosa. The following day, her naked body was found in a creek bed near Enterprise Road in Santa Rosa, and there was an oily substance near her body. The autopsy report said that Wendy had been sexually assaulted with her ankles and wrists tied up, and that she had died from strangulation. 13-year-old Lori was an 8th grade student who was reported missing on November 11th, 1972, but at that time, she was still alive. Lori often had to run away from home because of family problems. She normally stayed at friends' houses and hitchhiked to get around. Hitchhiking wasn't always dangerous, but making it a regular thing was like putting life in the hands of fate. The last time she was seen was on November 30th. Witnesses said she was picked up by a white man with an afro hairstyle driving a white van. Later on December 14th, her body was found in a ravine on the west side of Calistoga Road. Her cause of death was a broken neck. There was no sign of sexual assault. Her brother Larry told in an interview, "The mystery surrounding her death has always messed with my head. She defended me tooth and nail. I loved her. That was my big sister." On February 6, 1973, Carolyn, a 15-year-old resident of Anderson in Shasta County, chose to run away from home. She left a note. "Dear Mom, don't worry too much about me. The only thing I'm going to be doing is keeping myself alive, Carolyn." The reason she chose to run away from home was that she had witnessed a double murder case. In order to protect her own life, she had no choice but to do so. After running away, she had been living in her grandmother in Garberville. However, as time passed, she became increasingly paranoid that she would be discovered by people connected to the murder case. So, for her, getting far away from this place that frightened her was the best choice. In the summer of 1973, because her sister was about to give birth, Carolyn wanted to see her newborn nephew with her own eyes, so she returned to Garberville. After living with her grandmother for a while, Carolyn decided to leave and head back to Illinois to get back together with her boyfriend. Her grandmother then drove her to downtown Garberville, which was also the last time she was seen. At that time, she was trying to hitch a ride along Highway 101. On July 31st, her body was found near the location where Maureen and Weber's remains had been found. Her cause of death was confirmed to be strychnine poisoning, which causes violent muscle spasms, convulsions, and ultimately suffocation within approximately 1 hour. Her death was a bit different from the other victims because she was poisoned, but because she was found hitchhiking and it was in Santa Rosa, they put her murder case in with the other Santa Rosa Hitchhiker murders. Diane, 23-year-old from Miranda, located in the southern part of Humboldt County, was the mother of a 2-year-old son. In the winter of 1973, she left her husband and son, decided to hitchhike across California. Diane had never had any problems before and never felt in any danger while hitchhiking. December 22, 1973, she was last seen hitchhiking along Highway 101 at Zuma Beach in Malibu, as she wanted to travel to Garberville to spend Christmas with her family. Just 6 days later, on December 28th, her body was found in Mark West Creek, Santa Rosa. Her cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Unlike some victims who were found naked, she was found wearing clothes. The last victim of the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker murders was a woman whose name has never been confirmed. On July 2, 1979, someone found the bones of a young white woman about 100 yards from where Lori's remains had been found. At first, people thought the body belonged to 20-year-old Jeanette, a Hawaiian-American student at Santa Rosa Junior College. April 25, 1972, Jeanette was hitchhiking on Highway 101, and then her friend saw her enter a pickup truck driven by a white male aged 20 to 30 with an afro hairstyle. It is worth noting that Jeanette has never been found to this day. What her fate was, whether she was abducted to another place by someone, or whether she was killed, everything remains unknown. When the woman's remains were found, she was found naked and bound inside a travel bag. Due to the severe state of decomposition, her cause of death could never be confirmed. Investigators linked this case to the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker murders because the manner in which she was bound was the same, and the location where she was found was close to where Lori's remains had been found. Through statistical analysis, in fact, even though these murders are very similar, especially where the remains were dumped and how they died, there are still some subtle differences that make it hard to believe these murders were committed by the same person. While Maureen and Weber were found naked, and their remains retained a single earring, orange beads, and a gold necklace with a cross on it. Although it wasn't clear how they died, from this information, it can be concluded that the murder's motive was not money, but sexual in nature. In 2019, when Maureen and Weber's friend was interviewed, she said that when they went to the party, they told her that a tall, thin guy had invited them to smoke weed together, and that guy looked like Bundy. At that time, one of the first people the investigators thought might be involved also was Bundy. So, could he be the one who committed these murders, the murderer who killed both Maureen and Weber? First of all, Bundy's victims were usually young white women with long hair and tall, slender builds. Secondly, Bundy's criminal motive was confirmed to be abnormal sexual impulse. He got a sexual kick out of killing, and strangulation was his way of making sure the victim died. According to what Maureen and Weber's friend said, that night, both girls were dressed to look like 18 or 19-year-old girls. Maureen and Weber also matched Bundy's killing method, particularly as their naked remains corroborated his habit of collecting items from the victims. However, the thing is, Bundy was a financially struggling thief who had the habit of collecting his victims' jewelry as his trophies. If Maureen and Weber had been killed by him, he would not have left behind any valuable items. And as a high-intelligence serial killer, he also never had a record of simultaneously controlling two victims in the strict sense. These differences are sufficient to prove that he could not be the murderer who killed Maureen and Weber. When Wendy was found, her ankles and wrists were both bound, and her cause of death was also strangulation. Compared to other cases, her case presented one distinct difference. The murderer left several clues behind, something that had not occurred in the other victims' cases. Investigators first found an oily substance at the scene, similar to oil used in mechanic workshops. And several weeks after her death, the murderer placed her personal checkbook into a drive-up mailbox across from the post office, and investigators found 2 fingerprints on it. Regrettably, despite the discovery of 2 fingerprints and the suspicion that the murderer might have been a mechanic, not much information about this case was disclosed. Lori was found in a ravine. Her cause of death was a broken neck, accompanied by spinal cord compression and hemorrhage. Unlike other cases, she had not been sexually assaulted, and her death scene looked more like an accident. Investigators speculated that Lori had been forcibly taken into a van, and while attempting to escape from her kidnapper, she opened the door of the van, which was traveling at high speed. And coincidentally, at that moment, the van was driving alongside that ravine, and then Lori fell into the ravine. During the fall, her neck was broken, and because she did not receive timely assistance, she ultimately died there from exposure of her wounds. Furthermore, it is worth noting that the driver of the van was described as a white man with an afro hairstyle driving a white van, and such a description of the driver was also mentioned in Jeanette's case. Carolyn's cause of death was strychnine poisoning, and the place where she was found was only 3 feet away from where Maureen and Weber's remains had been found. At that time, investigators found a pattern at the scene formed by branches and wooden sticks arranged into a rectangle connected to a square. It resembled some kind of occult symbol, so they believed this murder was connected to the Zodiac killer. And coincidentally, at that time, the Zodiac killer's range of operations happened to be near Santa Rosa. But it turned out to be a really small and highly controversial clue. A local teenager said he had arranged that pattern before Carolyn died to show his girlfriend the shape of a new trailer. What's more, the Zodiac killer specifically targeted couples inside vehicles, attacking them with firearms or knives, and he taunted his victims. Also, as someone who enjoyed being in the public eye, he even never mentioned or claimed the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker murders in any of his letters or ciphers sent to the media and police. Diane's cause of death was strangulation by ligature. She was also sexually assaulted. Judging from the bruise on her left eye and the wound on the back of her head, there were signs that she had struggled violently. Maybe Diane got into a car, and then the driver forced her to have sex with him, and she struggled during the process, which is why she had a bruise on her left eye. Maybe she accidentally bumped her head during the struggle, or the person who sexually assaulted her just killed her. These circumstances make it difficult to believe that the person who killed these victims was the same one. It seems more like there was an unknown serial killer as well as several different murderers. For example, Maureen and Weber's friend indicated that the man who was with them looked very much like Bundy. In Lori and Jeanette's cases, witnesses provided detailed descriptions that the person who took them away was a white man with an afro hairstyle driving a white van. The clues found in Wendy's case suggest that the murderer might have been a mechanic. In Carolyn's case, she died from poisoning, unlike those victims who were strangled and sexually assaulted. Although her remains were ultimately found at the same location as Maureen and Weber, by that time, the place where their remains had been found had already been reported in newspapers. It is not entirely impossible that the murderer learned the exact location of the remains through word of mouth among local residents. In addition to Bundy and the Zodiac killer, there were 3 other suspects emerged during the investigators' investigation process. The first suspect was Frederick, a 41-year-old creative writing teacher at Santa Rosa Junior College who had a record of sex crimes. After he died in a car crash on August 24, 1976, some pretty disturbing paintings he had made were found among his stuff. They showed scenes of whipping and torture, and one of them had a person in it who looked just like Wendy. Some people believe that Frederick was the murderer who had escaped murder charges through death. 2 investigators stated that there was some evidence showing Frederick had knowledge of the murders, and the murders stopped after that, his death. The second suspect was called Jack, and he had a long record of crime and bad behavior dating back to his childhood. He went on to become a serial rapist, committing multiple burglary, assault, and attempted murder cases. Later, after he died in prison in December 2021, investigators found out through DNA testing that he was linked to a 1996 murder case. Due to the found that Jack's family owned property near Santa Rosa in the 1970s, and his manner of handling victims was similar to the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker murders, he was suspected of being the murderer. But forensic comparison did not yield a match. The third suspect was named Jim, a native of Santa Rosa and a former police officer with no known criminal record, who died of cancer in 2008. Jim's family owned a ranch in Sonoma County, and in the early 1970s, he would frequently stay at that ranch. The reason he was suspected of being connected to the Santa Rosa murders was that, after his death, his family found a box containing women's jewelry among his belongings, and that jewelry did not belong to anyone in his family. Among these items was an earring, orange beads. It is worth noting that when Maureen and Weber's remains were found, an earring, orange beads, and a gold necklace with a cross were left at the scene. In August 2022, Jim's DNA profile and other relevant information were turned over to the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. Until this year, the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker murders was still handled by there. But because of money issues in the local area, it may take months or even years to process DNA. So, no latest information has been disclosed.